Welcome to this episode of Tech Threads. I'm your host, Max Watson, and today we're talking about working with engineers and some creative ways that PMs are using AI in user research with Merrill Tingey, who is a senior product manager at Health Catalyst. Well, Merrill, welcome to Tech Threads.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Max.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. We've kind of been focusing lately on like engineering, AI, and analytics. So I'm glad we can have you on because you have a really heavy like engineering background, but also transitioned into product management and know a lot from that. So I think it's going to be fun to kind of talk about both of those and see kind of what advice you have for those PMs here in the UPG community. But before we jump into it, could you kind of explain who you are and maybe a little bit of your story from, engineering to PM?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Merrill Tingey, and like I said, I'm working as a product manager. I've been doing that for about the past 4 years or so. And before I was in product management, I worked in a variety of different kind of more technical, hands-on type roles. I spent a few years as a data engineer, spent a real brief stint as a software engineer, doing some Angular and .NET development and that sort of thing. Spent a lot of years as a kind of a back-end data mart architect, and had some time spent as a like a more of a BI visual developer, kind of a dashboard developer sort of role. Been in healthcare for the last a little over 10 years or so. Before that, I was in transportation. And if you go far enough back, I just have a bunch of blue collar jobs and things like that. So I'm a Utah guy, born and raised here in northern Utah, and moved around a bunch a little bit, but for the most part, I've been based here for as long as I've been around. So.
Yeah, what's that process been like coming from, or I guess like what made you want to jump into product? I guess let's start with that. I mean, because engineering, you work with product managers, but it's very, you build it rather than like envision it. What made you want to jump from one to the
Well,
other?
I usually joke that I was tricked into becoming a product manager, that I didn't actually do it on purpose because I had been in a data engineer role on a team that really needed some structure and some organization, and really needed kind of that glue that pulled the different stakeholders together and kind of got us all aligned. And I had that before on other teams where we had a strong product manager and where we had really good release management processes, and we were all kind of really aligned on that. So I sort of went to my boss at the time and said, "Hey, I think we need a release manager here, and I think I'd like to be the release manager and kind of focus more on DevOps type things." And they had kind of seen some of the work I had done, and said, "Hey, we were thinking a little bit differently. We need a product manager. Would you like to do it?" So I ended up agreeing, kind of not knowing what I was agreeing to exactly, but having an idea from some previous product managers I had worked with. And I spent probably the first year just figuring out, what does a product manager even do, and learning who this Marty Kagan guy was, and a whole bunch of other names that I hadn't heard before, or just figuring out, now that I'm a product manager, how should I approach this and what should I do? So I kind of joked that I was tricked into it, but it was easy, early on, right in the beginning, it was easy for me to latch onto it and really like it, because I've always liked different I love behavioral economics. I love just trying to understand why people choose the things they choose, or what makes people tick. And there's so much of that in product management that it really drew me to it once I was in, and helped me feel like I had made a good choice, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I feel like I'm the same way too. I read all sorts of like psychology books and like decision books and like product design books, and it's super interesting because I'm a software engineer right now, and so I read those books and I like am building stuff, and it's like okay, like let's use this little trick to like get people to like it more, like stuff like that. I think is super interesting. So it's cool you found product is kind of an appendage of that.
Yeah. It's funny. I think there's so much to be said for an engineer who spends time thinking about product management disciplines, and vice versa. I mean, there's a lot of paths that you can go through to get to product management. And I think nowadays a lot of people study that and they go through school with that idea in mind. But so many people that I know who have ended up in product management ended up through design or through engineering, and in some cases through sales and through other paths. And I think it's kind of cool when you get there that way, because it makes you really well rounded. And I think it's even cool when you go through product management to engineering or other places. I don't know, a product focus is so valuable in so many roles that I think it's a great thing to have.
Oh yeah, and you kind of go like you're in their shoes almost. So when
Yeah.
you're kind of like working, because I know product managers work very closely with engineers. So being able to like say, "Hey, I've been there, like, and I'll help you. Like, let's work this out." I feel like is a lot better. When you were like in engineering and data engineering and all that stuff, did you ever have anything that like PMs did that you liked or like disliked when you were working with them?
Well, I always liked the PMs most who left it up to the engineers to determine how we would solve a problem. So one of the things that I was taught by a great product management leader, and it was kind of before I was ever a product manager, was that, the product manager should really be the one helping us decide what is the right thing to build, and then the engineers should determine how to build the thing right. So that was her thing, was like
Mhm.
build the right thing, build the thing right. And the PMs that I worked with that I really liked the most were great at doing that. They were great at helping us understand why we were building the thing we were focusing on, why it was the right thing to do, and gave us enough information as engineers to understand the why behind it, but then would pretty much leave it wide open to us to determine the best way to solve it. So I think, empowering the other side of the fence in both cases, whether you're the engineer, whether you're the product manager, I think that makes for a great relationship. And in my experience, those have been the best ones.
Yeah, how do you? Because I know I feel like sometimes, and a lot of people have mentioned this, and even like sometimes in my job, I feel like sometimes we just get like PDRs or like, hey, here's this feature you need to build. Like, this is the requirements. And we don't have a lot of context on like what actually it's doing or like what users are actually expecting from it. How have you, either in your teams or like in the past, helped your engineers have a better like vision and have more product sense when they're building out these features?
Yeah, I find that the engineers really respond well to any kind of data-driven insights that you can give them. And so, for a while, while I was figuring it out, I would err too much on the side of not giving the engineers that kind of why behind. I would just focus so much on what we were doing, on all the requirements and what the specs had to look like, and things like that, that they sometimes felt like they were in the dark. So it took me a while to kind of figure this out, but I learned there was a meeting where we were having a retrospective, and one of the engineers said, "Hey, you don't need to shield us or guard us from this. Like, help us protect our time, but don't worry about protecting our ears. Like, we want to hear about this stuff. We want to know about it." And so I've kind of tried to find a balance between, as a product manager, making sure that I focus. So I really try to focus at the feature level and not get down into finer grain details down at different user stories or, kind of detailed requirements. And because I have pushed myself to do that, I've found that it's forced me to stay more at that higher level and focus on the importance, the reason why, have some kind of a justification or some kind of validation for why we think this is the right thing to do. And it keeps me out of the technical details and the weeds in a way that I think the engineers really appreciate, because they can solve for that. So if I can paint a really clear picture for them as to what we should do, why we should do it, and really what the reason behind it is, then they're usually really happy to go out and find creative ways to solve it. And because I have a technical background, sometimes I think, oh, I know how they're going to do this. But most of the time, I'm not right about that, or I'm not exactly right. They usually come up with something that I hadn't thought of. And so it's just confirmation that it's better for them to be in those seats and better for me to help in a different kind of way. So.
Yeah, what helped you? Because I know, like from my perspective, like as an engineer, like yeah, we get like really detailed into like performance and like the exact timing of things. And how did you change from like that mindset to more of like a holistic, product sense? Or what helped you get more of that product sense when you transitioned?
Well, I think it took some time for me, really, because uh maybe it's old habits die hard kind of a thing. And I just personally, I really believe strongly in finding the right ways to deliver, and a lot of the technical infrastructure, and I love DevOps methodologies, and I like to adopt those kinds of things. But you know, I think mostly it was probably really efficiently delivering some features that kind of weren't well received or went entirely unignored, that woke me up a little bit to the idea that maybe I was focusing on the wrong things in my early days as a product manager. So, we do a lot of reports, and we do a lot of analytics and things like that, and we would pretty consistently ship reports and analytics and features and things that had were really well groomed, really well detailed. They had a great design to them, and then they would not get adopted the way we had expected to them. So I kind of got frustrated with that, and I would see, you know, multiple scenarios where we thought we had the right thing, we thought we had nailed what we were going to do, and we had executed on it really well, and then it was just kind of a big waste of time, or it felt like a big waste of time, and then pretty soon we were on to the next thing. So I think for me it was kind of that. It was kind of stumbling through getting it wrong in terms of making sure that we're focused on the right thing and getting my focus as a PM a little bit wrong and focusing too much on the details that led me to kind of step back and realize, hey, I've got to shift my mindset a little bit if I'm going to really be the kind of PM that I want to be.
Right. Did you ever have any like resources or books or like tips that really helped you in that kind of growth process? Because I feel like everybody kind of goes through that. Like when you first get into a new like job or even like a PM, there's that growth phase where you're just gonna kind of bounce off some walls and then you're gonna eventually figure it out from trial. But is there anything that like boosted that growth that you think really
Well,
helped you?
yeah, definitely. I mean, I try to read as much as I can, and a lot of time I end up just consuming blog posts, articles, things like that. Of course I'll read a book on product management or on different things when I can, but I'll try to just kind of consume as much as I can and then see what sticks. There are a lot of voices that I quickly started to like to listen to. I really like Melissa Perry. I like Martin Erickson. I like a lot of what Marty Kagan has to say. I really like Jason Fried from 37 Signals, the way he approaches things. But one of the big things for me, I've got it right here. I usually keep it close by, but there's this DevOps handbook. I love this book. There's so much good stuff in there. I've just got all these like bookmarked pages and dog-eared pages and stuff. And while this is really focused on software delivery and kind of it's a lot more technical and concerned with a lot of that how as opposed to what. There's so much gold in here for a product manager. There's so much in here about feedback loops and making sure that you're shortening feedback loops and getting the right kind of feedback and stuff. And so for me, this was like one of my earlier revelations as a product manager. One of the things that really kind of helped me stop and think, oh, I need to think bigger. I need to think more broad. I need to consider things that I hadn't even considered before. And then another thing, corny as it might seem to say on this podcast, because we're all part of this UPG group, but just getting into some groups like UPG, there's another one here in Utah called Front, and just getting a little more out of my bubble of product management in the company where I'm at and learning more about the ways people are doing it at other places. That massively opened my eyes to just different ideas, different approaches, different ways of doing thing. And the idea that you can try something and it doesn't have to work and that's okay. You can try something else afterwards. So I think, just trying to consume as much of the expert opinions as I could and take what works for me and leave the rest, along with really connecting with more locally people who are doing the same kind of work I'm doing. Those have been the two things that I
Mhm.
feel like helped me make some breakthroughs.
Yeah, hitting those ideas. I think the UPG does a great job of that. And that's kind of the goal of this podcast as well, is just to like throw different ideas. I know since I've been talking to so many different, product managers in all different types of like fields and specialties, they all have different ways of doing things. And it's interesting to kind of hear them and how it works for them. And hopefully other people can kind of like get those same ideas and like, yeah, like try it out. If it works, great, keep doing it. If not, like you tried it. It doesn't always fit for everybody, but it's been really cool to hear. I mean, going back kind of that book that you brought up, and I mean, a lot of people have been asking this kind of as well. Like as a PM, because I know a lot of PMs wish they were more technical and they wish they had kind of this understanding that you have from like, 10 years of working as an engineer in data and stuff like that. What do you think is the most important things, or like, I guess the highest impact things that PMs who are not technical can learn about that'll kind of boost or help them the most?
You mean like in terms of working with the technical folks? Is that kind of
Right.
well, I'm a big believer in participating in the pull request process. And even if you can, even as a PM, even if it's something silly, I think it's kind of an interesting thing to actually be a pull request submitter as well as a reviewer. When that's something you've done as an engineer, you kind of have a shorthand or you have an understanding of how the engineer's workflows work. And when you're working together with an engineering team, And I work really closely with our engineering team. And I guess it might be different, at every company might have a different degree of closeness there. But for us, we work really closely. So it's important for me to understand where they're at with things and what the challenges are. So one thing I would recommend to a PM who's never done it is try to create a pull request and try to review other engineers' pull requests. And you can be an optional reviewer if you have a good rapport with your team. They're not going to mind you being in there poking around. And I think it's going to give you an idea of what some of the workflows are like for the engineers and what some of the things that steps that they need to walk through would be. I also would recommend that if you're a PM and you want to be more technical, just go build something. And it doesn't matter if it's bad, it doesn't matter if it's buggy or if it doesn't even work. It doesn't have to be for anyone. You're probably never going to get rich on it. So don't save your good ideas for some day down the road when you have a patent lawyer that you can talk to. Just build the thing and try to make it work. And in that process, you'll understand what it's like to have bad code that needs refactored and how stubborn some bugs can be and what some of these kinds of things that your engineers are going to run into on a day-to-day basis are. And it'll go a long way with your engineers, just for them to know that, okay, you've taken a few steps in our shoes. You kind of know some of the stuff that we're working against. I think that buys a good rapport with them. It can also pull an engineer more into your world. If you're willing to get into their world a bit and see the things the way they see them, it can make them more curious about your world as a PM and some of the things that are important to you or what you consider to be the main parts of your role. And I don't think everybody should do everything, but I think everybody should specialize and then at least try to do a little bit of something else, especially when it comes to PMs and engineers. I think it's great to have some crossover there.
Yeah, and I feel like as a PM, you're always constantly like touching all different areas, like marketing, sales, engineering, and the more technical side of it. I think it's really good to have that kind of diverse
Yeah.
experience, especially as you're working.
And I should probably be
Um,
clear. As a PM, I don't contribute to our code base really at all. But like maybe on the rarest of occasions, I might do a little thing here or there and the engineers will humor me. So I'm not suggesting like you should be, pushing code as much as any kind of engineer, but I just do think that is worthwhile to kind of go through those steps and understand them.
oh yeah, have you ever taken? I mean, from your time as an engineer, have you ever taken any like tools with you to being a PM, or is there anything you do analytics wise that might be different from like traditional PMs that has really helped you in your product sense and developing products?
Well, I think I'm much less hesitant to just jump into some data and see what I can get out of it than maybe other PMs that I've worked alongside who didn't take a technical path to get to the PM route.
Hmm.
What I mean by that is like, we have a lot of data, not all of it is good, and it's really useful. Like I spent a lot of years writing SQL code and I'm still really comfortable writing SQL code and I'm pretty comfortable in Python as well. And I think one of the things that I get in terms of a benefit from that is I can jump in and pull together data and start to do some analytics that aren't kind of ready-made presented to me as a PM. We
Mhm.
don't have dedicated product analysts where I work. I know a lot of people have the benefit of having that, but we don't have that here. So it's really important to me in the role that I'm in that I'd be able to do some of that analytics and work with some of that data on my own. Um, so, I mean, that's one thing I'm grateful for to have a little bit of that background. And I also think it just like having when you've written code a lot, you get really comfortable with the idea that things are going to break and they're not going to work. Like I don't worry too much about what if we ship a bug,
Mhm.
if we've done our due diligence and we've got good test coverage, I'm really comfortable with the reality of bugs and I'm really comfortable
Mhm.
explaining them to clients and stakeholders and that sort of thing. I think that's been a benefit too.
Oh yeah, because you kind of come from that world. Like even for us, we just launched a product like 2 months ago, and we're still finding bugs like months after. And
Yeah.
it's like it'll happen once every year, but like you just eventually someone will run into it, and then they ask you
Right.
questions about it, and you're like, well, there's that random edge case where you click this sequence of buttons and switch browsers like 3 times, and then it happens. So it's like I don't know what to tell you. Like we'll fix it. It won't break anymore, but like
Yeah.
don't freak out about it. But I think that's kind of a cool perspective to come from. Do you have any like trends that you're seeing or that you think are going to be going on in the product world? And I guess probably like the healthcare product world, because that's kind of your
Yeah.
domain.
Well, healthcare is interesting. I feel like health tech is it moves slower because of all the regulatory kind of attachments and
Mm.
there's a lot of serious dire consequences if you get things wrong in healthcare that could happen. And so healthcare tech moves slower and more cautiously than a lot of other sectors. And that's both good and bad, like so many things, it has its trade-offs. But I see in general maybe some of the same trends in product management that you see across the world. I will say it seems like product management continues to grow as a field. It attracts more attention. At least over the last few years, right? There are more product manager jobs out there than there used to be 5 or 10 years ago. Companies are hiring more for product managers, and I think that's bringing more attention to the space of product management and the discipline in a way that's good for everyone. I wish companies were investing more in entry level PMs. It seems like everybody wants to hire the 10, 15-year PM who's been out there and done it all and not invest in the new PM that's starting out or a year or two in. And I think that's unfortunate. I would like to see more of that. Of obviously AI, whenever you talk about trends, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
It's disrupting so many things, and there are so many people who think it'll kill PMs and people who think it won't. And I'm in the middle. I think it'll kill a lot of the menial, repetitive tasks that a PM will do. And I think the successful PMs will be the ones that adopt AI tools in a way that multiplies their efficiency. We've been doing something fun. We lost part of our budget for user testing, and so we've been trying to replace those real user test subjects with AI agents that can test for us, and that's been interesting and fun to do. So I think the successful PMs of today are the ones that get creative and the ones that find interesting ways to use new tools and adapt to new challenges. But just in general, I think I'm happy to see product management continue to get more attention over time. I believe in it as a discipline. I think it's
Mm.
hugely important, and when it's done well, it's one of the most valuable things you could possibly do, I think. So I don't know if I'm up on all the trends, but those are maybe a few things that I seem to notice.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting you mentioned those like AI agents that test your products. Can you explain more about that, kind of what that looks like for you guys? Because I think
Yeah,
that's super interesting from like a just an engineering perspective, but
we're kind of in exploratory early stages of this, but what we're essentially doing is we're building out profiles of user personas and we're creating AI agents. So we're using OpenAI for this, and we'll basically give it a bunch of information about a user profile. And some of these user profiles are based on our actual users. So, we'll have like a something like a composite of 4 or 5 different people who share the same or a very similar role that are a user of ours. And we will kind of pull that together and we'll give it all kinds of different information about this person, about their personality, about their experience, about what's important to them, about their tolerance for tech jargon or their tolerance for threshold for frustration and things like that. And the idea is just that we're not trying to replace actual user testing with pure AI, but we're trying to augment what limited amount of actual user testing we have the budget and the capacity to do with AI on top of that. And so we kind of can multiply that army of virtual user testers almost infinitely, right? And that's what's been really
yeah.
cool. Um, you know, it's much faster. We can take screenshots and throw them out to these users. So the OpenAI can see the screenshots that we're giving them. The ones we are using don't click, so we don't have like a browser session that they click around in, but they can see the images. We give them all the background, and then we just ask them questions like we would ask a real user. And so far, it's
Wow.
it's pretty exciting. We are early in the stages of that, but it's something that we're excited to be working on to try to help us supplement what we have for real user testing. And I will say that's one of the reasons that's been exciting to me is because as a PM, a lot of times I feel like there's all this best practice product management advice out there. And so many of those things you look at and you say, well, for one reason or another, I can't really do that at my company. Like there's an obstacle, there's something that stops me from doing that. Uh, but one of the things I've really tried to do is pick an area that I want to do better at and just find any way we can to make progress, right? And
Mhm.
try to remove those things we can't do or the barriers or the excuses, the reasons why not. And even if we're doing it badly, at least we're doing it, right? So that's an example of an exciting thing that historically we've always just kind of said like, we can't do as much user testing as we want. We don't have access to users. We don't have what we need to do that. And this is, I think, an example of, and a lot of credit to this goes to the product designer that I work with. She's amazing, but we're just finding ways to kind of get rid of those obstacles and work around them and do things differently. So it's been fun.
Yeah. That's such a cool, I've never even heard of that. I think that's really cool. That's a cool use case for AI because I know a lot of people, they throw like chatbots on their websites or like, hey,
Right.
we have AI. Like that's a really unique, cool way that I've never heard of that people are using AI to like better their, product experience. I mean, as we kind of run up on time, do you have any last advice or any tips that you think other PMs either don't know about or that it's helped you kind of in your product life?
Well, I'll throw out a few. I always feel weird giving other PMs advice because I feel like I'm still just beginning my journey and learning, and there's so many people who are so good at it. But I think a product manager in particular, this is true to some degree of everyone, but especially for a product manager, you have to be a leader by example and not by authority because you have such a huge impact on how a team operates and what the culture of that team is and how engaged the different people are from the engineers to the salespeople to the subject matter experts in your implementation and your operations and all these different people. You've got to be that glue that kind of fills in the cracks between and pulls them together. And so I'm naturally introverted and I have to make myself, break that habit, which I think is good for me. But I think, yeah, as a PM, you've got to lead by example and not by authority and just model the behavior that you want to see across all teams. Pick small goals and find little ways to improve it and just make that momentum and let it snowball and get bigger. And don't try to do it on your own. I've been consistently surprised at how much other people want to help and will help and get engaged if I'll branch out and bring them in and kind of help them be a part of it. And then maybe the other piece of advice that I'm trying to follow and I'm trying to live is just be creative, build things, build them in public, put them out there for other people to see and scrutinize, and don't worry about it if they're not good because I think you just get so much benefit out of building something. Even if your main day job is not to build stuff, I think that's just really worth doing.
Yeah, and I totally agree with all those. And I think a lot of PMs out there could really take those things and a lot of the stuff that you've said tonight and hopefully, put it into practice and try new things out. Kind of like we were talking about earlier, you know, a big plus of the UPG community is just having all these different ideas and being able to like try them, throw them out there. And so everybody can kind of learn and grow together. And UPG is like this incubator of like awesome product managers and just who will continue to grow. But Merrill, I really appreciate you hopping on tonight. I really hope a lot of PMs out there find a lot of value in this. And yeah, I appreciate it.
And thank you so much, Max. I'm glad to get to do it, and yeah, I appreciate what you're doing in the community. It's really enjoyable to be a part of it. So thanks.